Greetings, metalheads, and welcome back to MetalDisciple.com's The Week in Reviews. This week, I've got reviews for the Dio tribute album, Ronnie James Dio, This Is Your Life, an Italian band called Shores of Null, and the return of South Korean band Harry Big Button. As we close in on 4 years of living in a world no longer blessed by the presence of one of metal's greatest voices, we woke this week to the release of a new tribute album in honor of the late, great Ronnie James Dio. This is the all-star affair known as Ronnie James Dio, This Is Your Life. Even 4 years later, I still feel the loss of Ronnie sharply every time I hear one of his songs. So, all the time. But when I listen to This Is Your Life, I cannot help but smile at all the metal greats who came out to show their appreciation for Ronnie's body of work. The album opens with a brilliant version of Neon Nights performed by Anthrax. I gotta say, with Joey Belladonna back in the band, everything Anthrax touches is fucking gold now, and this is no exception. The guys tear the music up, and Joey's vocals are bloody brilliant. This is a great opening track. Next up is The Last in Line, performed by Tenacious D. Tenacious D is, of course, the comedy rock duo of Jack Black and Kyle Gass. These guys normally take the rather bizarre and comedic path with their music, and I love them for it. I was mildly concerned that having them on the tribute would be a bit like having Spinal Tap on board. I would have been okay with that too, I suppose, but, you know, people can get touchy about things like tributes. I was moved and extremely impressed that the guys played it completely straight and fucking owned the song. Bravo, gentlemen. The quality jams continue with Adrenaline Mob's take on The Mob Rules and Corey Taylor's Rainbow in the Dark. This brings us to the only song on the album that I don't really care for, Straight Through the Heart by Hailstorm. I love the Dio version, of course, but I've never been, and likely never will be, a fan of Hailstorm. Hailstorm is not a metal band, however they choose to brand themselves. The best I can give them is that they're a radio-friendly corporate hard rock band. To each their own, but this just isn't for me. Whatever my opinion, it's great that they wanted to pay tribute to Ronnie. Moving on, we have Motorhead with Saxon's Biff Byford on vocals doing Starstruck. No complaints there. Then the Scorpions do a beautiful rendition of The Temple of the King. This leads into another of my favorite tracks on the album. My First Lady of Metal, Doro, performs a killer version of Egypt, The Chains Are On. I understand that it makes sense to include Killswitch Engage's cover of Holy Diver, but this version has been around for years. I think it actually predates Ronnie's passing. So while it's a cool version, meh, feels kind of like filler. I'm going to jump over the next two tracks for the sake of brevity, but both Catch the Rainbow and I, sung by Glenn Hughes and Oni Logan, respectively sound great as well. Now we get to the song that I was very curious to hear. Rob Halford singing Man on the Silver Mountain. The intro started very bluesy and, well, different, which started to worry me, but then Rob's amazing voice kicked in, and I was quite pleased. I was listening to Judas Priest's Sad Wings of Destiny last week, and noted how much I loved the sound of Rob's voice on The Ripper. Rob is known for his incredible range and high-piercing vocals, but songs like The Ripper, and in this case Man on the Silver Mountain, remind us that Rob also sounds amazing in a lower range as well. I wonder if we will get a taste of that lower range on the forthcoming New Priest album. What metal tribute would be complete without a Metallica medley? I think Metallica's motto must be, so much metal, so little time, because these guys seem to really like cramming a bunch of songs into one. Live, they often perform medleys of their own songs, and on Garage Inc., they did a Merciful Fate medley comprised of Satan's Fall, Curse of the Pharaohs, A Corpse Without a Soul, Into the Coven, and Evil. The Fate medley was wonderful, and so too is this one. Called Ronnie Rising Medley, this track consists of pieces from A Light in the Black, Tarot Woman, Stargazer, and Kill the King. I cannot think of another metal band that has released cover versions of so many songs and consistently done so well with so many. I'm not aware of a single Metallica cover song that I haven't enjoyed. The coda to the album, the track from which the album takes its name, is the song This Is Your Life, sung by the man himself, Ronnie James Dio. Taken from Dio's 1996 album Angry Machines, this is a fitting and poignant closer for an album that pays majestic tribute to a man who entertained fans for so many years, while obviously influencing his musical peers and those who would follow him. Thank you, Ronnie, and many thanks to the artists who contributed to this album. Have you ever wondered what it might sound like if Alice in Chains played doom metal with a splash of progressive black metal? Me neither. But then I came across Italian band Shores of Null and their first album, Quiescence. Most weeks, on Monday night, I'll pull up a list of the new releases coming out on Tuesday and see if there's anything that looks interesting that I haven't heard yet. Usually, there are a bunch of releases that are fairly underwhelming, but when I see a band I haven't heard before, I'll copy and paste their name and album into YouTube and see if I can hear anything from the album. Now, 9 times out of 10, I listen to a few seconds and move on to something else. That 1 time out of 10, though, that's where I find something that requires further investigation. People sometimes ask me how I come up with all these great obscure bands. Well, that's my method right there. I listen to a ton of bands, and eventually you come across gold. Upon hearing the vocals, I was immediately intrigued by Shores of Null. The clean vocals frequently use a harmony just so reminiscent of Alice in Chains that it is impossible to ignore. I expect that the singer isn't actively going for the Alice in Chains sound, but still, it's hard to miss. At this point, I could have just dismissed the band as derivative and moved on, but I continued to listen. Once I'd gotten over the novelty of the clean vocals, I began to focus on the music. Sometimes it comes across as thick and melancholy doom, but then it will suddenly kick up the tempo and lean towards a very progressive interpretation of black metal. The vocals never venture into black metal territory, but they do head into some seriously cool death doom harshness. Trying to categorize Shores of Null is both deceptively easy and frustratingly difficult. It is fairly simple to dissect the songs and file away the various pieces into their respective subgenre categories, but as a whole, Quiescence is a bit more complicated to compare to other albums. I honestly cannot think of a suitable album to use for comparison. This album is like a rare genetic aberration. It stands alone. Sometimes bands try to throw in too many ingredients in an effort to be different, and they spoil the soup. But these songs, they flow so seamlessly and naturally that I would not make that accusation with Shores of Null. I first heard Quiescence a little over a week ago, and while I've listened to some other albums in that time and again I keep coming back to Shores of Null. The more I listen to this album, the more firmly ensconced becomes my opinion that this is a really great release. The fact that this is the band's first album only magnifies my respect for what they have achieved here. Will this be one of my top albums of the year? It's sure starting to look that way. A little over a year after the release of their last album, South Korea's Harry Big Button is back with a new EP called Perfect Storm. I have had the pleasure of reviewing the band's previous 2 releases, so I was excited to get an email from main man Sung-Soo Lee delivering me a copy of Perfect Storm. The last time I spoke with Sung-Soo, he was still in the process of recovering from a bad traffic accident, so I was glad to learn from his email that he is now fully recovered and rocking harder than ever. That's great news, man. Perfect Storm contains 5 new songs, and I could tell almost right away that the band's sound has evolved a little more even in just this past year. Last year, when I reviewed King's Life, I noted that it seemed a little bit heavier than 2011's Hard and Loud. Once again, I feel like Sung-Soo is perhaps pushing the heavy envelope even further with Perfect Storm. The songs still feature the cool, heavy riffs I've come to expect from Harry Big Button, but they seem just a little bit more aggressive than in the past. I've always felt their songs, while heavy, were also very hard rock and blues influenced. I still hear that, but I swear I'm also picking up a little punk rock attitude too. Maybe a little Motorhead going on or something. Not in all the songs, but once in a while, I hear it. That brings me to Sung-Soo's vocal delivery. My favorite aspect of Harry Big Button's sound has always been the vocals. Sung-Soo's voice is deep and clear, and he just makes singing sound so damn effortless. His vocals on King's Life blew me away with how great they sounded. This time around, he does all that and more. Perhaps it's a bit of that punk rock thing I just mentioned, but his already incredible voice sometimes now has a more gritty edge to it that adds even more heaviness to some of the songs. Some of his semi-spoken passages almost sound like a British punk snarl. That's pretty cool. The first 4 songs are pretty heavy and rocking, but then the final song, the title track, Perfect Storm, slows things down a little and starts off with some quiet guitars and beautiful vocals that actually remind me of a great 90s band from Windsor, Ontario called The Tea Party. The similarities vanish once the song kicks into heavier gear, but by that point it is clear that Perfect Storm is the most diverse and dynamic song on the EP. This is the perfect song to close with. Congratulations to Sung Soo Lee and Harry Big Button on yet another excellent release. Make sure to check these guys out. Alright, that's it for this week. As always, make sure to check out MetalDisciple.com for more metal news, reviews, and videos. See you next time.